So in this session, we're going to be talking to two of the former winners of the Appalachia Startup Pitch Competition. So we've got Cindy Sparks up here and Dr. Elijah Jensen as well. So Cindy is with Complete3D and Elijah is with Black Box Energy Systems.
Before highlighting our sponsors, we'd just like to state that the views and content shared on this platform do not necessarily reflect those of our show sponsors. Middletech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to be supported by an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you're a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information by clicking the link in our show notes or going to kyinnovation.com. Middletech is also supported by Huntsicker, an impact venture studio based in Lexington, Kentucky. Huntsicker is creating companies out of the ordinary by founding and funding the next generation of purpose-driven startups. They partner with founders to create indispensable solutions to the world's most fundamental problems. On a quarterly basis, they host an invite-only intimate gathering called Fireside Convos, where attendees representing a wide network of stakeholders in the regional entrepreneurial ecosystem discuss timely topics, including the role of AI for startups out of Kentucky and the challenges of identifying and attracting talent. To be considered as a guest, visit huntsicker.co/fireside to apply. Middletech is sponsored by Bolt Marketing. Take your website to the next level with a website that's built to work. At Bolt Marketing, they're revolutionizing websites for small businesses that are affordable, customizable, and hassle-free. Whether you have a construction company, a boutique clothing store, or you own a hot yoga studio, they have options for you. Click the link in our show notes to explore their marketing options that can transform your marketing and grow your business. And as a personal note, Bolt Marketing built our website, and they were awesome to work with throughout the entire process. We highly recommend working with.
Let's just kind of start this off by talking about high level what your all's businesses are. So on the podcast, I always enjoy asking kind of a goofy question to do this. How would you describe what you do to your mom? So Cindy, we'll start off with you. How would you describe that for Complete3D?
Is this a loaded question? I feel like this is therapy. So we make 3D printing accessible to everyone. We provide maintenance, education, and training so that everyone can use 3D printing.
I love that. And so just to give us an idea of what exactly that looks like, you guys actually have a full kind of setup of all these 3D printers, and then you put them into classrooms, you put them into different businesses, just to help people kind of visualize what this actually looks like.
Yeah, we help hospitals make operating room tools, patient-specific implants. We help teachers teach engineering as well as make models for education purposes. And we help manufacturers prototype faster and use 3D printing to make things here rather than source them from overseas.
And what about Black Box Energy Systems? Tell us a little bit about that. How would you describe that to your mom?
Yeah, so we design and make highly efficient power generating equipment like generators and also motors.
Very cool. So where are those typically used? Is that kind of for more industrial applications? Give us a sense of who your customers are.
Yeah, so we mostly target industrial applications that are looking for high efficiency, and also applications that are looking for lightweight generators. For instance, if it's something that's carried around, right, or if it's something that has to go in an aerospace application that has to be very light but also very powerful. So we like to say we're a software-defined multi-motor that's very lightweight and efficient.
Very cool. And talk about the problem that you identified when you set out to start this business. I mean, what problem were you setting out to solve?
Yeah. So our story kind of starts in the energy storage space, which is, kind of different from motors and generators. But I set out to make a really good motor generator for flywheel energy storage because our grid needs some stabilization, and we can't do it all with batteries, with chemical batteries. And so flywheels are a really good way of storing energy using the mechanical motion. So we did some magnetic bearing technology, and I realized, a lot of the problems that were coming from these systems that were making them inefficient or expensive was the motor. And so I set out and I was like, okay, how do we make this better? Made a design and then realized that, that's probably 10 years in the future that people are going to really be interested in the energy storage space and the flywheel stuff and that stuff. but people are really interested in the motor now, in the generator aspect of it. So that sort of pivoted us into that. And we also realized that customers really wanted to know data about their motor. So we built in an application where you can go on a web app and you can, in real time, see what's happening with your motor and see if the bearings are needing to be replaced or things like this, which helps the customer, a lot of industrial customers that are producing things. It helps them with their maintenance costs and things like that.
Talk about building an energy company in Kentucky. We have a long history of energy. So what's that experience been like?
Yeah, I like to say that, they used to say coal was powering America. And I was like, well, as coal kind of goes away in being a major, influence in power production, we can still, in this region, power America, right? We can still make the motors, we can make the generators, we can make all this stuff just more efficiently. And so, to me, Kentucky's the perfect place to do this, where, we're not just licensing, we also can license our stuff, but we're also planning on being a production company. It's perfect place to do manufacturing, and we have all the expertise we need, right here.
Absolutely. And Cindy, I want to bring that question back to you as well, just the problem question. So when you guys first started Complete3D, what was the problem that you kind of see in the market that you guys set out to address?
Yeah, it started with our first business making biodegradable cremation urns. We went out, we bought all these 3D printers to make cremation urns, and we realized that it was really hard to keep them up and running. And we quickly realized that other people that were out there buying a bunch of 3D printers were coming to us for help. And this business organically grew from that. And,
Interesting.
Yeah, so 3D printers have gotten a lot easier to use. But there's still a huge demand for training, and we're figuring out how we can make training easier with AI, how we can diagnose printers remotely, how can we make the 3D printing experience better so that we can use it for manufacturing in Kentucky. I think there's a lot of synergy between our businesses in that aspect.
Where is 3D printing in the cycle of adoption? I feel like we've been through peaks and valleys of interest in that space. Where would you describe we are today?
I think we're a little bit past early adopters, but it's not in the mainstream yet because they're still hard to maintain, and they still aren't quite as reliable as they could be. I think we're just a few months or a year away from another huge leap in reliability and serviceability. So I think we're on the cusp of them being in the mainstream. I think the last year has been a whirlwind, and I'm really excited to see what the next year holds.
And talk about how artificial intelligence impacts just the usability of that type of technology, or the approachability of it for somebody who might not be super technical. How are you guys thinking about kind of the intersection of the two technologies?
Yeah, for training and education, you can use it as a chatbot, or the 3D printer can send diagnostics to the manufacturer or to the servicer of the printer. And then for quality control, most systems have LiDAR, or some of the FDM systems do. But how can you use that LiDAR data to tell the quality of the part that was printed?
Very cool. So I'd love to get into talking about kind of the origins of entrepreneurship for you guys. So when you're thinking back before starting this business, how are you guys exposed to entrepreneurship? Like, what was your first kind of glimpse into, okay, this might be a path that I can take? I'll pass that off to you first, Elijah. But yeah, tell us what your early entrepreneurial influences were.
Yeah, so when I was about 15, I made a small business, which was doing audio production for people. I'm an avid musician, and so I would buy small pieces of equipment, and then I'd do something and make more money, get better stuff, and it sort of kind of spiraled up. And so that was my first introduction into entrepreneurialism. And then when I was in college, I started, of course, getting into more scientific things and trying out these designs and things like that. And so thinking about patenting things. And when I was at the University of Vermont, I actually ended up doing a competition, and I won for designing a solar inverter, which was sort of the precursor to what's done now, which is microinverters, which go on solar panels. And mine was a DC tied one, but now we have these AC tied ones. And so I kind of did that, and then so I'd always had these interests, and I made a consulting company called Jensen Dynamics, which is still sort of there. I just don't have as much time as I used to. And we would help people do projects and design things. But Black Box is my first sort of, I have to go out and raise money type entrepreneurial thing, which has been an entire learning experience, because that's a different way of thinking.
Yeah, we'll have to circle back to fundraising and getting capital for a business, but is there a personality trait or something about you that you would point towards and say, this has really helped me be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, freedom to some extent, right? Being able to say, this is what I want to do this, and I want to make this happen, and not necessarily being told what to do, right? And having the personality that can say, I'm going to make self-discipline, sort of saying, I'm going to actually make this happen without having to have somebody else sort of push you along. That's probably critical in that.
No doubt. Cindy, how about you? Tell us how you were exposed to this disease called entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I don't want to make this a therapy session, but when I was in middle school, my parents quit their perfectly good jobs for seemingly no reason in my middle schooler mind. And I was like, how are we going to eat, guys? Because I'm very type A, and even though I was the kid, I was still like the caretaker. And not really, my parents are fine, but I was very worried about how we were going to eat over the next few years. And so they started several different businesses and finally settled into dog grooming. And so I helped them start that, and that was really fun. And I said, I am not ever going to start my own business because they're insane. And I said, I'm never going to do that. I'm going to work for a corporation my entire life. And so I did what any person in that situation would do. And I, got my engineering degree, and I worked for a large corporation, and I lasted about 10 years. And I was like, maybe my parents weren't so crazy after all. And so I did the same thing to my son as any good recipient of generational trauma would do. And so, here we are during the pandemic. My husband and I, quit our perfectly good jobs and started 3D printing.
I'd love to just linger on the fact that you kind of took the same path as your parents, which was co-founding a business with your husband, with your partner. Talk about the dynamic of that. I mean, does that add kind of another level of intimacy with your partner? Does that add another level of, now we have something else to fight about or like disagree on? Like, talk about how that plays out in the business and in the relationship.
Yeah. So Eric and I started dating when we were 16. So we've been together for a long time. I joke that he follows me around and that I've just never really been able to get rid of him. So we, I got a job in the coal mines. He was like, I want a job in the coal mines. When we moved to Lexington and, I got a job at Columbia Gas, he was like, can you help me get on at Columbia Gas? So he was the one that quit first and started the business. And so I was like, for the first time, I was like, hey, can I work with you? So that was fun. And so we've always worked together. I've been on the engineering side of things, and he's been more of the technician. And so that's our role for our business. And so it kind of works out because we've always been in that dynamic where I'm the planner and, I create the plans and he's the executor, and we disagree over most things, but in a healthy way.
Yeah, that's great. You have a question?
Well, I was going to same question to you. What personality traits or what about you think lends itself to entrepreneurship? I always like asking this question because there might be some people in the audience that don't know if it's for them, and they might know they have a personality trait that does align well with entrepreneurship. So what is that for you?
Yeah, it's kind of hard because Eric and I are opposites. And I'm the very passionate one that's very excited and very excitable, but I also get disappointed. And Eric is the very steady one who never gets discouraged. He's just always there and supportive, and he might not get super excited about what we're doing, but he's always just, he's my stability. So I think without him, I would not be an entrepreneur. So I feel like maybe it's not my personality trait, but just being gritty and being able to do what you need to do every single day, I think is really important.
Yeah, I actually think that's interesting because, I got multiple founders, co-founders, and then, some of our engineers. And there have been times where I've been like really frustrated and they're like, it's okay, it's gonna be okay. I'm like, okay, thanks. We play off each other. So it's a really good point that, building that team is a necessity.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think if you can surround yourself with a team and with co-founders that are complementary to your skills, you don't want to have a bunch of the same type of personality traits as what you already have. I think that is very important. I'm curious, I feel like for those who are interested in entrepreneurship but haven't tried it before, don't necessarily know where to start, I think it's always kind of fun to pull back the curtain and say, okay, what were some of the first steps you actually took when starting your business? I think some people think, I've got to go file a business entity. Some people are saying, I need to go do an MVP. Be interested to hear for you two, for your current businesses. I know you had a business already running, transferred it into another one, but would be curious to know what were those first few steps into starting the business. I'll start with you, Elijah.
Well, that's kind of interesting, right? Because we're very similar. So when I started the flywheel work, I was just trying to figure something out from a scientific perspective, right? So I was running my consulting company, doing various projects for various people. I was also working for a NASA contractor at the time. And so that's kind of how it started. And I thought, well, this is interesting enough. I'll go down and do this program. It's actually called Launch It. It's run by U of L. And that's where I met Amy Womble, who's one of the co-founders, right? And she was doing another idea at the same time. She was going through that program with another idea, which I still think is a good idea. But she really liked what I was trying to do. And we got along really well. And we said, you know what, why don't we spin this off, actually, make this into something, its own thing. And the term black box comes from and in the engineering concept of a black box. You don't care what happens inside of it, right? You just care what the input and the output is. And so we're just trying to make it easy for people, right? This is this thing, it does this thing, you don't have to worry about it. So then, we went and we founded an LLC out of that. So I guess to more concisely answer the question, it's for me it was get to some at least scientific MVP, which is not a business MVP, right? But something that says, I think there's something here, and then start from there.
You had a thesis and you tested it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, to riff on that, as a scientist, is building a company a scientific endeavor or is it an art? What's the dynamic there? I think that is a question that I've asked myself several times, and I think that the early stages actually align themselves better with an art, and as you start to find repeatable patterns, it becomes more of a science. But in your eyes, as a scientist, what is it like building a business?
I agree with you. I think it's an art at the beginning, and I think it becomes a science as you get into more sustainable operations, right? Because in the beginning you have to be able to pivot, right? You have to be able to go, okay, well, nobody wants this, but they want this part of it, right? Okay, we can do that, right? But then you have to be careful, right? Because you don't want to pivot too much, right? But once you get to a stable point, you can kind of, which we're getting to, I think, now, is saying, okay, now we can sort of plan better, right? Because there is more science to it. But I agree.
Sydney, how about you? When you think back to when the business kind of transitioned from 3D printing urns to now we're Complete3D, what were some of the first actions that you and Eric kind of took around doing that?
Yeah, we did the Von Allman Center for Entrepreneurship incubator or boot camp. And I think that's a good place to start and flesh out an idea. So, if anybody out there has an idea, I would highly recommend going through some sort of incubator like Launch Blue or VACE or something, along those lines. I know those were both UK examples, but in previous businesses, we did the Clean Tech Open, out in California, which was super helpful. So if there's an incubator specific to what you're thinking about, or if you want to go super prestigious and Y Combinator or something like that, the Techstars, there's a lot of those out there. And if you have an idea and you're still trying to flesh it out, I feel like that's a good place to get everything together, maybe get a co-founder to get kind of the resources to put it together to make it a legitimate business.
I love it. Let's talk about the pitch competition that you guys did with SOAR here. So before we get into talking about Startup Appalachia, I'd like to understand, had you guys formally pitched your businesses prior to that pitch competition? And I'd like to kind of spin this into a conversation around funding and capital. But yeah, we'll start there. Elijah, I'll pass it back to you. Before doing a pitch competition, had you had like kind of that formal going through the slides doing a pitch before that?
Yeah, I'd done a few pitches before that in various places.
Primarily investor pitches, or had you done kind of other?
Primarily investor pitches, but also some kind of a more, just informative or sales pitch kind of things. Yeah.
How many times do you think you had to pitch before you felt like, okay, I've got this down now, and I've got a good kind of flow, and this makes sense, and I feel like I'm communicating it properly? I know there's some iterations you go through that as an entrepreneur. Yeah,
I still don't think I have it down. I think it's always a learning process. You're always going to be trying to make it better, at least. An advantage for me is that I'm used to talking in front of people. I teach, and I've done a lot of academic talks. So this was just sort of changing that from let me tell you this cool thing that we've done to let me tell you this cool thing that we're working on, and I also need money, right? So I know that's sort of crass, but that's sort of the idea, right? And so that's kind of my experience.
What about you, Cindy?
So I hadn't pitched this business, but I've done other pitch competitions and other pitches. I may or may not have won 5 Across before.
That is, that's definitely one to shout out. Shout out Awesome Inc. in Lexington. I was going to say you've won multiple pitch competitions at this point. So
yeah, and Keith McMunn ended up buying the business. So
that's true. He liked it so much he bought it. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
So you might be able to sell your business at a pitch competition. You never know.
What advice would you give anybody in the crowd on how to pitch a business effectively? Either one of you.
Practice.
Yeah, practice. And also, if you have 2 founders or multiple people, either select one to go up there and do the pitch, or be really practiced on what you're going to do. I've seen a lot of people, trying to go back and forth between 2 people. That's hard. But yeah, practice it. Also make it concise and realize who your audience is. Because if you're pitching to a room full of engineers, you're going to want to have slides that show what's happening, in our case, right, an engineering company. But if you're pitching to a room full of, finance professionals, they don't necessarily care. They want to know that the engineering is sound, but they want to know that your business plan is sound more so. So you have to kind of tailor it a little bit.
Yeah. One of the best things I've ever learned from a startup incubator, I'm an engineer. I've never been great at talking in front of people. That is not my strong suit. But they told me that pitching your business and talking in front of people is just like any other skill that you would learn. The first few times you do it, you're bad at it. And don't be afraid to be bad at it. You have to be bad at it several times before you're probably going to be good at it. And that really changed the way that I thought about it, and made me feel better about getting out of my comfort zone. Because the first few times I pitched, I bombed. It was bad, real bad. And even after, I had a pitch with a co-founder, and it just went horribly. He completely went off the rails. And it's okay, and you can laugh about it and move on, and you're not going to die or anything. And that's important. It's really scary to think about pitching your business sometimes, but knowing that everyone's probably supportive of you. Nobody's going to laugh at you. It's fine, and it's a really good growing experience.
Just one point before passing off to Evan here. I feel a similar thing about middle tech. It's almost like exposure therapy. Is like the first few times you do it, you get the shaky voice, your palms are a little sweaty. It was the same thing with me of like trying to record a podcast and know that people are going to be listening to it. And the more you do it, the more reps you get in, the more comfortable you get with it. Same thing with pitching your business, which is why I think it's great that we have kind of multiple pitch competitions that give you exposure to that. You might not be winning a ton of money at each of these, but you get to refine your pitch. You get to get better at giving that pitch. And I think that's an important thing that we have a lot of in this area.
Yeah, I've talked about this topic a lot and done several deep dives on it. If you really think about it, the act of building a business is sales all the way through and through. If you want to get investors, you have to create a pitch. If you want to get a customer, you have to create a pitch. If you want somebody to join your team as an employee, you have to pitch them on joining your team. So the act of being a founder is sales. The entire thing is. And so you just have to get over that hump of, I don't like getting in front of crowds. I don't like pitching things. I'm not a salesman. And I think people look at sales wrong. They look at it and think, oh, this is like a car salesman. But it's much different when you're building a business. You have to look at it as I'm solving somebody's problem. My company is that solution. And you have to do that over and over again. With an employee, somebody might want a better living. They might want a better job. And then you have to solve that problem and cater your pitch to that problem. And so I just like to always make the point that being a founder is being a salesman.
Yeah, and to your point of it's not like selling cars, it's also you're selling the future value of something too, right? Especially if it's a startup. So, I can sell the car. It's right here, right now. You can drive it away. You have to create this understanding of what this will be, what it could become, And I think also if you're talking to investors, it's about, it's not just saying we need your money to make this happen, but we also need your expertise, your skill set, your connections and things like that.
Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of entrepreneurship is you're essentially trying to convince people of your worldview that you're going to help create, and then you're trying to get the capital to get it there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's dive into talking about capital and funding the business and getting these things off the ground. So I'd like to talk to each of you about your experience bringing capital into the business. It sounds like both of you guys have taken kind of different approaches or in different stages of that. Elijah, we'll start with you. How did you get this business off the ground from a capital perspective? And then we can kind of lead that into where you are currently with that.
Yeah, so we kind of bootstrapped it from the very beginning, I guess 2 years in, we won our first SBIR, and so that was good, non-dilutive funding. Shout out to the Cabinet for Economic Development. We got a matching grant as well on that project. So that got us a long way, and we've only just raised. We have 2 investors now, and of course we're going down that road further. But for us, it was at least me and co-founder Amy, we were able to do that, right? We were able to invest our time and resources and things into that in the beginning. So we're kind of we didn't have to fundraise right up front.
How would you describe the difference between fundraising via grants and now that you're looking for investors and have several investors? How do you need to change your perspective between the two?
Yeah, grant fundraising, obviously, it's very different, right? Because the grants are looking for you to do something of value that can help the community or can help scientific advancement, engineering advancement, something like that. So you're pitching something different to them than you are to an investor, right? So to the investor now, we're trying to pitch future value of the company and that we're going to make money doing this cool, new, amazing thing. Whereas to for in our case, the Navy or some of the other ones, it's we can provide you scientific data and all the stuff that you want to make your technology better. So yeah, the pitch has obviously changed, and I am the one that has probably the hardest time with that because I'm good at pitching to people and saying, "Hey, do you want to work for us?" Really good at that, and I can go talk to the engineers and stuff. I'm learning, I think. Hopefully, more about what do the investors want, right? And how do we help them get what they want and build those relationships.
Yep. And Sydney, talk about how you guys approach that. So a little bit different of a scenario. You had a business kind of up and running, transferred that into another business. How did you guys navigate that change? Where did the capital come from? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we were lucky. We had good corporate jobs for a long time, right? So we've just self-funded everything so far. We, have gotten loans from the bank. We've been really fortunate that we were in a financial position to be able to do that. We've had quite a bit of revenue. So far we've been able to do everything, I don't want to say bootstrap because we have.
Without giving up equity.
Yeah, without giving up equity. With this new AI project, I think we're going to open up a round of funding because we want to do it really fast. So our business is sustainable in its current form, but if we want to grow faster, we're going to have to take on some investment. And I think, taking on investors may make us a more structured company. It may, allow us to go into more verticals more quickly. I think it's going to be a little bit of an arms race with the AI project. So that's why, the reward of taking on investors may be worth it. So that, when you're starting your business and raising capital, that's something to think about. Maybe you are able to fund it on your own, but are you comfortable with how fast that growth is going to be? Do you want faster growth?
I think that's really important to point out because I'm not sure enough founders think about what it means to go raise venture capital or go raise money from people that expect a return, and especially venture capitalists who expect it within an 8 to 10 year window. They are raising these funds and expect exits and liquidity events to return capital. And I think that influences very strongly how you grow the business. It's not let me get this capital and slowly grow. Like you said, it's let me get this capital and grow as fast as we possibly can and do it responsibly, of course. But when you start taking money from investors that, again, are specifically venture capital, it changes the nature of how you are supposed to think about your business. It's a different type of responsibility versus maybe grants or loans from the bank.
Yeah, like in our position right now, I was mentioning to somebody earlier that we're, kind of at an inflection point, right? We can keep going slowly growing, sort of, linearly. But if we really want to, hit it out of the ballpark, we need, some capital, right, there to be able to, go faster, right? And so that's probably a good idea for people to understand when they're raising or starting a business, is that there are multiple ways of doing it. It just depends on what your end goal is and how fast you want to get there.
I think another component of that is the market. So there's, venture capital that goes into markets that are very large and you need to grow fast because you want to absorb some percentage of the market share. If you're more of a small business, mom and pop, or a localized business, or you have a small market to go after, you want to raise capital that aligns to the market. And I think, venture capital, again, lends itself to, very large markets. You can deploy that capital to absorb some percentage very quickly.
Yeah, and something else I want to mention is another reason that we may want to take on investment is strategic investment. So some of our partners, may want to invest in us. And, that would be another reason that we would want to raise a round, to strengthen those partnerships, to get an investment so they can, buy our business once we get to a certain level of technology readiness.
Very cool. Yeah, just to linger on that part a little bit, I feel like that's something we really haven't talked a ton about on our podcast, but is a pretty relevant path to kind of go down. You mentioned it there, being able to align with a partner with the idea of an exit to that partner eventually. So I'll be interested to hear more of that as you guys kind of explore that path. It's an exciting one. Before you both kind of alluded to where you're looking into the future with these businesses. Before we get there, would love to just spend some time talking about challenges that you guys have faced and overcome as entrepreneurs. So I'll leave that pretty broad. I'm sure there's some things that kind of pop in your mind immediately when you think of roadblocks that you guys have hit along the way that you've figured out a way around. But Cindy, I'll start with you with this one. Challenge that comes to mind from building the business that you guys have overcome.
I think the biggest challenge for me as an entrepreneur is showing up as my best self every day. In a corporate job, you can get upset at something somebody said in a meeting and sulk for a week, right? And that's fine. Nobody's going to fire you. You're still doing a better job than 90% of the other people there, right? So when you're working as an entrepreneur, you're working for yourself. And if you sulk for a week, that might mean that you have to lay off a person on your staff, or like there's dire consequences for not showing up every single day. So just creating systems and processes and routines for myself, and everyone else in the business so that we can show up every day as our best selves and work in the right direction. So that would probably be my second one, is strategy, and making sure that everyone is working toward the same vision and same goal, and being a real leader. Because that's a completely different, being a leader in a corporation is different than being an entrepreneur, because someone else is setting the vision. And what do you do when you could do literally anything, right? So clarifying that and just making sure everyone is on the same page every single day.
What about you, Elijah?
Yeah, I actually agree with your second one the most, is that I have a tendency to think, see something cool we've done and say, oh, you know what, we could do this other thing with that. And then I have to stop myself and say, nope, no, that's not the plan. We can maybe we can do that later, but setting that vision and sticking with it, right? Making sure that you're, following that, because you are your own boss. And so, nobody's telling you have to do this. Then, being self-disciplined, right, to do that. That's a big deal.
Absolutely. I can see that being a struggle. That would be something that, if I was a founder on myself, just deciding what I'm going to do every day.
Yeah, exactly.
That in and of itself is a skill set. Let's talk a little bit about the current focus of the business and where you guys are taking it, let's say in the short to near term, 3 to 5 years, somewhere around there. We'll start with you, Elijah. What is your focus when you're thinking on that timeline?
Yeah, so right now we're marketing a product called Motor Vision. What we realized is that our hardware that we put inside the motors, it monitors vibration and temperature and all these parameters of the motor to tell you its health, was really interesting to some of these bigger companies. We would talk to them and they would be like, oh, that's a really cool motor. Yeah, that's awesome. It provides you data? It provides you data. It's also more efficient. It does this. So like, cool. It provides you data? Right? So we keep getting that back and from the customer discovery. And so we're like, okay, well, if you really want the data, while we're figuring out this whole production stuff, right, and trying to make these motors, really cheap enough to manufacture and all these other things, maybe we can provide you a product that provides you the data on your current motors. And so that's what we did. We took a couple months and said, okay, we're going to make this thing that goes on a motor. It provides you all that data, hooks to the cloud. And so we're actively marketing that. We did a pilot project in Tennessee a few weeks ago, which could show some. Actually, we found a bearing that was bad in one of their motors. They had suspected it was bad, so they were like, okay, well, that confirms it. So things like that. And then we're also working with some people on some contracts to customize some of our motor technology that will hopefully help them put that into production and some licensure things. But our main goal is to get the motors into production sort of next year time frame. And Motor Vision kind of is now, but we're in marketing mostly for that.
Just to kind of linger on that for a second, because that's something that I feel like unless you're in the industry and you understand kind of the consequences of having a bad bearing, for example, being able to provide that sort of data to the customer, I'm sure has, a sequence of consequences where it ends up saving a bunch of money, or if they didn't do it, has some sort of, bad outcome. Where if they don't replace something that needs replaced, it's a bad deal. So
an auto manufacturer that will remain nameless loses about $45,000 a minute on their assembly line if it goes down. So that can happen if one of their motors fails. So they are keenly interested, right? I mean, one failure can pay for the system, right? A year of the system, right? And so that's a big one. We actually had somebody that told us that was once in Tennessee. They told us that they have to come in at 4 a.m. to check their HVAC systems for when they start on Monday, because they don't do production on Sunday. And so, because sometimes they'll fail over the weekend and they don't know about it, and their process will be too hot. So they can't actually run their process, and it'll take them like 8 hours to get back into it. So they always come in really, really early. So they're paying a bunch of people to go around and check all this stuff first. Well, with our system, they'll know. I mean, it'll send them a message and go, hey, it's not working, or hey, everything's fine, so you don't have to worry about it.
Super cool. Cindy, what about you guys? What are you guys focusing on currently, and what are you focusing on into the next 3-ish years?
Yeah, currently we're working on getting 3D printers out there into hospitals, into schools, into manufacturers' hands, as many as we possibly can. But in the future, we envision an ecosystem in Kentucky, even Ohio, Tennessee, West Virginia, Indiana, right? This whole Midwest and eventually the whole United States. But Kentucky is first because there are so many innovative people here, and there's such a need. But we envision an ecosystem where it starts in schools. Students are interested in 3D printing, in manufacturing. They're able to go to either a community college or a 4-year college, get a degree in additive engineering. All the hospitals, have biomedical additive engineering technicians. We're able to make medical devices here. Surgeons are able to have models. Cadaver parts are no longer needed because you can 3D print them. Manufacturers are more efficient because they're able to prototype here. They're able to prototype on the fly. They're able to make things using additive in small batches. And I envision an entrepreneur ecosystem where all of this is kind of a feedback loop. I know before this session, we were all talking about the lack of venture capital here, and how more entrepreneurs here need exits. And I think if with the efforts of SOAR and with all of these wonderful programs that we have going on, that we can create an entrepreneur ecosystem where people are able to see themselves as innovators, make things, and then return their expertise and their capital into the system.
100%. Well, as we wrap up here and we're kind of thinking about, how we can benefit the ecosystem, just kind of a single piece of advice that each of you would have to any aspiring entrepreneurs that are building in this area, because it's definitely a different dynamic than what they might hear if they're listening to a podcast about building something in Silicon Valley. There's different dynamics building in Appalachia and in Kentucky. Elijah, we'll start with you. What would be your piece of advice to an aspiring entrepreneur here?
Yeah, I mean, understand that there is currently a lack of venture capital. Obviously, we all know this, but that there are organizations like SOAR that are really working to change this and turn things around, and they've done such a great job so far. So I'm really happy in what's happening. But also form partnerships, because I feel like we're good at that in Kentucky, right? We want to help each other out, and so I don't find many people that are negative towards us, right? And there's a lot of people that have helped us out along the way. So I think that's one of the big things is forge those partnerships, those relationships with people, and and just get out there.
I think that's a great one. I just want to expand on engaging all of the great organizations around the state. The state of Kentucky has laid out just this great kind of hub network, SOAR being one of them. But every single person I've interacted with in any of those organizations wants so badly to help and to connect you to other people. And that's really a lot of where the progress is made, is how many different relationships can you have, because everyone, it's like, oh, I can connect you to this person who can help you with this thing. And then before you know it, you have a really vast network. And that's a big part of building a business for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you, Cindy?
Yeah, definitely use all the resources that are out there. And, the more people you connect with, the more resources you can find. I'm going to add by saying find good mentors. There are tons of them out there. There are people around that have had successful exits. And most of them that I've encountered have been great and willing to help. And you have to take everyone's advice with a grain of salt because it's your business. So if you take everyone's advice all the time, you're going to end up scattered in a million different directions. But it's always good to network and see your business from a different perspective. So I think, just use your resources, find mentors that have done the things that you want to do.
I love it. All right. Well, Cindy, Elijah, thanks so much for coming up here and doing this live recording with us. Big thank you to SOAR for hosting the SOAR Summit. And we will cut it there.